Hello, my name is Joe, and welcome to my channel, Joe's Book and Movie Corner. Today I have a monthly reading report for you for the month of April 2025. And I also want to say, I know I've been tagged recently. I love doing tag videos. I have been very busy getting ready for a major life change that's happening in really just a few days. I won't say what it is. It may affect my reading output. So for the foreseeable future, the only videos I might be able to make are these monthly reading reports. I'm going to at least try to keep doing those, and then the occasional tag video. So even if I don't do these tag videos, please keep tagging me. I love Tag Tuesday videos. I will say, I won't say what's happening, but I do, on a side note, I have fallen in love this year with reading on a Kindle, and I think that's going to be very useful for me. One, because really I can just operate it with one hand, if another hand is occupied doing something else or taking care of something else. I can still read on my Kindle. So I'm glad I've fallen in love and really prefer now to read on my Kindle. So let's go ahead and get started. I have a few books to go over. The first one, though, I read for a reading event called April Adventures. It essentially coincides with the other reading event, Spring. I think it's called Spring into Adventure. But April Adventures by Robin Song Rees is what inspired me to read this book. And the book I read for his first prompt, which is simply just read an adventure book, is The Lost World by Arthur Conan Doyle. I'm rating it 4 out of 5. I thought it was great. I think my favorite part of it, and if you don't know what it's about, it's in the jungle of South America. There's this cut-off plateau that has dinosaurs on it. And there's an adventure to go, explore it. I think my favorite part was the beginning of the book all the way to kind of when they make it onto the plateau. The anticipation of setting out on this journey and adventure was a lot of fun. The rest of the book was really good. The ending was great, but my favorite part was kind of that beginning portion of it. To quickly go over the other prompts in April Adventures, the second prompt is read something outside of your comfort zone. And I will get into this. I'll bring it up when I get to it later in this list. But I read a short story collection, and generally, I've talked recently about how I struggle with short story collections because I usually need variety. But this month, that has changed for me. And I read a bunch of books of the same, not only the same genre, but the same universe. And I also read a short story collection. And then the last prompt is go on an adventure. Last month, I went to Asheville, and that was a lot of fun. In fact, I made a video in Asheville. Okay, so number 2, the second book I read. Well, when I say second book, these are not necessarily the order that I read them in. But I read In the Miso Soup by Ryu Murakami. This is a book that has been translated from Japanese. And I'm rating this one 4 out of 5. I enjoyed this quite a bit. It's a splatterpunk horror book. There's a scene in the middle of it that is extremely graphic. But if you've read splatterpunk, I mean, there's more extreme books out there. What I liked about it is it had kind of a lot to say and think about the country and society, the Japanese society and Japanese culture and the country of Japan. And it's about a young man in Tokyo, if I'm not mistaken, it takes place in Tokyo. And he works as a guide for sex tourists. So Westerners will come to Tokyo for a vacation where they indulge themselves in the sex industry of Tokyo. And he is kind of a guide that points out the good spots, and this is what you do to have a good time. So he's showing around this American tourist, and this American tourist is kind of weird, and he starts to think that he might be a serial killer. Like I said, there's a big scene of violence in it. The book itself is kind of about Japanese culture. That was really great. I really enjoyed that. I'm going to read more from Ryu Murakami. Audition is another famous one that he did that I'd like to read. I've seen the movie of that one. One thing that was a little odd, and I've noticed this with anime, I always feel that when anime is dubbed into English, there's kind of like this weird uncanny valley with the translation. They're trying to match, I don't know what it is, maybe the cadence of the Japanese language. There's just something off about dubs of English dubs of anime, and I felt a similar weird uncanny valley there's just something odd about the prose and the translation. After a while, I got used to it. It wasn't really a problem. But I noticed something a little funny. I don't know if that's the author or if that's the translator. I have another, I can't remember the name, but I do have another very short Japanese novel I'd like to read soon. It's not a horror book, but it's a part of the kind of the Penguin, kind of the blue-spined modern classics line. And I want to see if I want to read more Japanese works, and I want to see if the translation, has this weird effect, coming from Japanese to English. So other than that, I do recommend this if you like splatterpunk. Okay, so next up, everything else on this list, I could not wait for Book Trek. I've mentioned before that I am on a huge Star Trek kick right now. So let's go ahead and talk about Star Trek books before it's Book Trek. Book Trek, by the way, starts in June. The first one I read was Star Trek number 30, Demons by J.M. Dillard, I think you pronounce her name. And I think that is a her. If that's a man, I'm getting that wrong. This one, I'm rating it 3 out of 5, but again, that's not a low rating for me. 3 out of 5 is very solid. I enjoyed it quite a bit. The story is essentially kind of an Invasion of the Body Snatchers type story. Also, the planet Vulcan is a prominent setting in the book. Spock's father, Sarek, is a character. So if you like any Star Trek story that takes place on Vulcan, this is one of them. And also, I liked the guest character. She had this. There's an interesting aspect in this book. Her psi rating they talk about is off the charts, and that's something. A psi rating is not something that or like a psychic rating is not something that human characters have or they talk about on the show. So that's an aspect of these books. Sometimes the authors will introduce something that you don't see in the show. I sometimes struggle with things like that, but I'm trying to get over that. This book had a small thing like that, and it was fine. It didn't bother me at all. I recommend it. So for Book Trek, all these Star Trek books I go over are all recommends for you to read if you're taking part in Book Trek this summer. Next up, we have Star Trek The Next Generation number 34, Blaze of Glory. The cool thing about this, if you can see on the cover, this is written by Simon Hawke. This is a Constitution class ship. That's not the Enterprise D. So this story features a planetary system that has a group of kind of Vulcan, Romulan-like aliens. And there's some political machinations going in the society that's spread out over a few different planets. And there's also a pirate ship and a strong black market that is involved in this system. The stuff that I didn't really like about this book, if I haven't mentioned it, 3 out of 5, it's solid. One thing I did struggle with a bit was the Vulcan Romulan aliens in this system. There's like 4 characters. Some of them are villains, some of them are allies. I had trouble with these alien names remembering who was who and who was aligned with whom. I mentioned that in my nonfiction last month with political machinations and different. I have trouble with that, so I struggled a little bit with that. But what was really good and what I wanted more of was the pirate ship. So this Constitution class ship is now a pirate ship that is led by Captain Blaze, and this is the Glory, hence the name Blaze of Glory. That was great, and Riker and LaForge and a guest character. They have to kind of infiltrate this planet and find out more about the black market and the pirate ship, and they find their way onto the ship itself. It's really good. That aspect of it is great, and I wanted more of it. Next up, I read on my Kindle Star Trek. What number is it? Star Trek number 59, the original series number 59, The Disinherited by Peter David. I'm going to rate this one also 3 out of 5. It was solid. This story featured Uhura was a prominent character, and she is sent off the Enterprise to another starship to go on a different mission than the Enterprise. Now, the two missions of these two ships are, of course, going to converge. But she's brought onto this other ship because there's a mission that involves an alien race that cannot speak, and they speak totally through sign language with each other. Uhura learns the language, and it's interesting because the translator, the universal translator that they use, cannot, read the sign language. So I want you to remember that, because the next book it's funny. The next book that I read is similar. There's also on the Enterprise, there's this, they visit throughout their mission, or during their mission, they visit this planet that's applying for Federation membership, and they turn out to be this brutal authoritarian society, and they brutally slaughter these protesters, and Kirk is disgusted. The plot of the story, again, these two things, it's not really important. I'm not going to get into the actual plot, but overall, if you like Uhura, you'll like it. It's pretty good. It's solid. It's my first Peter David book, and I know he has written many Next Generation books, and he's well known for them. The next book is also on my Kindle. This is not a numbered original series book, but I read Troublesome Minds by David Galanter. I'm not sure. Solid, 3 out of 5. This book also features a species that cannot speak. Unlike the last book, these guys are telepathic. So they have a sign language. Interestingly enough, the sign language from this species, the universal translator can read the sign language. So they don't need Uhura to translate. So I don't know, must have gotten an upgrade in between these two books. But they are a psychic society. They speak telepathically with each other, and they speak sign language with outsiders. And there's one character that's kind of lives on a colony that is like a super psychic. And without even realizing it, he starts kind of mind controlling everyone around him. And he eventually takes over this whole colony planet. And if his group gets over to the home planet in this system, basically he's going to become the total psychic dictator. So a really great premise. One issue I had that kept coming up, and I was like, this doesn't make sense. So Spock, Vulcans are telepathic, so Spock is also in danger of being controlled by this like psychic dictator. And there are many references to, and of course we're dealing with telepaths, so Spock is of course going to be important in the end of resolving the plot. But the problem is that they keep referencing the fact that, can we trust Spock? He might be compromised, and we wouldn't know it. And Spock says, I think I'm good, but yeah, I could be compromised, and I wouldn't even know it. So I had a problem with that. Like, wouldn't the Enterprise back off and figure out another strategy? I don't know, to deal with these guys. But other than that, it was an interesting premise and an interesting kind of alien species that's in the book. Next up, I read an old paperback. This is a Star Trek book classic. This is the outside of my comfort zone that I mentioned for April Adventures. This is a short story collection called Star Trek: The New Voyages, edited by Sondra Marshak and Myrna Culbreath. I'm rating this 4 out of 5. I really enjoyed this. I always mention I need variety. Clearly, I read all these Star Trek books, so variety was not a problem with me for this month, and I had no problem reading these stories. This book, the first story in this book called what is it called? Nivar, I did not like. So I read that first story and I was like, I might not like this. Everything else I loved, thought it was great. This collection is worth it alone for the final story called Mind Sifter. It involves Kirk going back in time to Earth, and his his memory is, he's got memory problems, and he winds up in a insane asylum. That story is great. This book is worth it just for that short story alone. The other story that really stood out to me is it's a very weird title. It's called Visit to a Weird Planet Revisited by Ruth Berman. That was great. So all I'll say is, if you like the movie Galaxy Quest, and if you're a Star Trek fan, you should, and you haven't seen that movie, go watch it. It's basically an honorary Star Trek movie. If you like the movie Galaxy Quest, and it's about a group of actors that played, basically, they were on essentially a Star Trek show, and they get transported up to a real Star Trek type situation with a real spaceship. If you like that movie, this book is worth it for, again, I have to look up the title. Visit to a Weird Planet Revisited. It's essentially Galaxy Quest way before Galaxy Quest. It's really good. It's a lot of fun. So I liked it. So I also have Star Trek The New Voyages 2. I've heard it's not as good, but I'm excited to read that one too. And if I haven't mentioned it, these were fan stories. So again, this is a classic in early Trek fiction. And lastly, the final book I read was Star Trek number... I have to squint. I'm not wearing my glasses because the reflection doesn't look good. So it is Star Trek, the original series, number 13, The Wounded Sky by Diane Duane. My copy is an older Timescape edition, so it doesn't have the numbering. It's got that nice gold title. I think this is a first edition. I like finding the old Timescape versions of these books. This was great. I'm rating it 4 out of 5, and I have some problems with Trek books. And Diane Duane does a few of these things, but she gets a pass because she does them really well. So the first thing I have a problem with is in Star Trek books, when there are non-humanoid characters of part of Starfleet, that kind of doesn't feel right to me, because in the show, especially the original series, it was basically a human crew with Mr. Spock as the only alien. So when we see the Enterprise and it's filled with aliens, and then now that, it's budgetary reasons that happened. But nevertheless, when I read a novel and the crew is just all these different alien species, and including non-humanoid aliens. This alien on the cover, I don't know if you can see it. That's an alien. She's a member of Starfleet, and she's this like crystalline arachnid. When that character showed up, I was like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to like this. This just feels weird. The character is so well written that after a couple chapters with this character, I didn't care. I loved this character. She was great. And Diane Duane did a great job writing her. So I sometimes have that issue, but it's okay. This one, I didn't mind. The other issue I sometimes have, and really I have, this really applies to later Star Trek movies. Star Trek traditionally has treated the starships like battleships or submarines, right? When they go into space battles, they're not doing Star Wars type dogfights. I mean, they're big ships. They can't do that. They're too massive. In kind of new Trek in general, but I noticed it especially in the J.J. Abrams Kelvin timeline movies, they show the Enterprise doing flips and banks and zapping in and out of warp immediately into a battle. And I understand why they do it. It's to kind of like up the adrenaline in the action, but it doesn't make sense for giant starships to be flying around like they're X-wings in Star Wars. So Diane Duane basically she has the Enterprise do stuff like that. And normally I wouldn't like it, but the way she writes it, it's really good. And it works because the maneuvers that Sulu is doing, he's jumping in and out of warp, and he's doing these crazy maneuvers as he's fighting all these Klingon ships. And there's a point, and basically Diane Duane makes it obvious that the maneuvers that he's doing is not normal, and he's testing the limits of what the ship can do. And there's even a Klingon ship that like tries to match Sulu or match the Enterprise, and the Klingon ship just breaks apart. It can't handle the stress. So though Diane Duane does Star Wars-esque fights, she justifies it by saying this is abnormal. What Sulu is doing is incredible and was not, the Enterprise is not intended to fight battles like this. So it really worked. It's really gripping and thrilling. Even though I'm rating it 4 out of 5, I do have a minor issue with the third act of the book. So the beginning of the book, and another aspect that I like about it, there's a lot of science in it. This alien character is a physicist. And if you've ever taken an astronomy course, you will appreciate that the science that Diane Duane puts in here, it's not just the normal kind of Trek technobabble that you'll sometimes see in Next Generation and Voyager, but it's real science. And I could appreciate that. I was noticing things like, oh, I get what she's talking about. If I were to read this when I was younger, some of this stuff would have gone over my head. The last third of the book, reality starts to kind of break down. And I think it goes on maybe a little too long. So basically the characters, what the narrative is telling us is not what's literally happening. So what they experience and what they see, that's not what's literally going on. And I don't have a problem with that. I do think it went on maybe a little bit too long. But I think Diane Duane earns that because she put so much real science into the first half of the book. As the book is kind of reaching its climax, she can kind of play around with, the weirdness of the final act. So like I said, maybe it could have been cut down a little bit. But the end itself, the final ending was great. And then the plot was incredible. Also, this features them going to a whole different galaxy. So the mission that they're on, the first starship to travel with this experimental drive to another galaxy, it was incredible. So this is another, I recommend all these for Book Trek, but definitely Star Trek The New Voyages, I recommend if you've never read it, and The Wounded Sky by Diane Duane. It's a lot of fun. If you like the motion picture, you might like this. But anyway, that's all for now. As I said, who knows what my reading output is going to look like. Keep tagging me in tag videos, even if I don't do the tags. Keep tagging me, because eventually I'll be able to do one. But that's all for now. Thank you.